Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, wherever you are dialing in from. I'm Anissa Turon, and I'm here with Brad Watrich, and we are talking about the SMME why, and really just delving a bit deeper into something we spoke about last month, which is the God complex. And both Brad and myself, just before we went live, we were discussing some of these nuances and where we may go wrong in labeling God complex. And we're picking up on these trends. So I really do want us to continue this dialogue, Brad, around what is topical right now that you're picking up in your own space, working with the SMMEs. And the same goes for me, whether it is SMMEs or just companies that I'm dealing with, or even within myself, where is this God complex showing up? And I know you've done some more research around, how it might exhibit in the behaviors.
Mm.
So I'd really love for the audience to just also indulge us and share your comments and ask your questions. The last time we had quite an interactive and engaging session, and we love that. So please don't hesitate to bring your stories and your battle scars around whether being a recipient of the God complex or whether you've had to learn through that experience of having the God complex, how that is self-sabotaging for you. So, Brad, welcome, welcome. Good to have you here always.
Yeah, it's awesome. I look forward to these monthly sessions where we talk around the why, the SMME why. And for me, the content we've produced around the God complex has been so profound because it's actually helped us as a business to evaluate how we approach situations to make sure that we kind of avoid, the signs. We identify them,
Mm-hmm.
avoid falling into that trap where you adopt the God complex as a survival technique. Yeah, and I can't wait to jump into, the different signs. I can't wait to talk around why we move into that space. I can't wait to talk around
Mm-hmm.
the trends that we're picking up with SMMEs at the moment. So yeah, looking forward to it.
Brad, I must tell you, I myself had to pull myself back this week because I must admit I had a bit of the God complex with a company that I'm working with in terms of driving lead generation for my own business. Because I mean,
Hmm.
I'm an SMME, I'm a small medium enterprise,
Hmm.
and I was so frustrated because I came with this arrogance of, but I know how to drive lead generation. And this is so many times, weeks that we into it. And the guy asked me a simple question: what have been your wins?
Hmm.
And I was like, there's been no wins, nothing at all.
Sure.
And then he said to me, I'm sorry, but the way you're coming across right now is as if nothing's worked. Surely something could have worked in the last 6 weeks that we've been running this campaign.
Hmm.
And then I had to take a step back and almost realize where my frustrations and energy was coming from.
Hmm.
Because when
Hmm.
we're running businesses, we want to generate revenue and new clients. And if we are pressed either for cash flow or in terms of growing our business, I found myself quite arrogant this week, almost, and I'm admitting it publicly, because I did show up with that God complex. It was like I knew better and I can see this is not working. And what are you guys thinking? You have the system to drive lead gen. And yes, you have success elsewhere, but it's clearly not working for me.
Hmm.
So please, please give me feedback on what you're picking up on this story, because part of what I had to identify is that I may have a bit of my own scarcity lack mindset that is filtering through. And so the fear of not driving sales when this campaign comes to an end, it's almost as if I've
Hmm.
wasted my investment.
Hmm.
But I could be coming across very badly arrogant, right?
Look, I don't know you as someone as arrogant. I think you're very confident and I think you speak your truth. But arrogant, I would never peg you as someone to be like that. But maybe I'm not doing your lead generation. I'm not in that. I'm not the recipient. But so I think we always need to take it back to the concept that as business owners, we're human. So we are going to make mistakes, and some of us make a lot more mistakes than others. Some of us make those mistakes in ways we're not maybe proud of and want to better. We also need to look at our current mindset, where we are. For us to effectively run sales campaigns and marketing campaigns, we need to come from the right mindset. So I always talk around, when you tackle sales and marketing, I'm on the belief that there's two sides to it. There's that spiritual side, and then there's the science. And if you're not spiritually sound and you're not spiritually strong, and you don't have the belief that that campaign is going to work, you have that resistance, you have that negativity, and you have the science is not going to be as effective as your expectation. So it's always important to come in as a balanced point of view. So when you're doing lead gen campaigns, it is a gamble. There's no doubt. Until you find your formula and until your team that's working on it, and this could take 6 weeks, could take 6 months, until you find that sweet spot, you're going to be putting money into that campaign with the results that you are not quite happy with. How that relates to the God complex is that
Yeah.
I think we label ourselves too quickly. And I think we get labeled very quickly. And I find that for
Mm.
myself because as a creative, I am hyper emotional. So I will react in a certain way to certain things that are triggers for me. And I feel like if you know me well enough and you understand where that trigger point is coming from or that reaction to that trigger point is coming from, I think in a way it may not justify extreme behavior, but it does justify me being upset. And I have full
Mm.
right with that. So you have full right as business owner to be upset. You have the full right because your campaign is not working according to the expectation that has been set in place.
Mm.
But you need to be open to advice and you need to be open to the feedback and almost the criticism that you're going to get from the team that's doing it. They're going to adjust it accordingly. They can see you unhappy with it. And they're going to come with suggestions. But if you're walking in there to say, I know better than you, I'm not going to accept your suggestions, this is never going to work, you're kind of not balancing the spiritual and the science together. And yet you're expecting the outcomes of the formula. So it is a tough one. Lead gen is such a difficult one to do because everybody always has an expectation of delivery, but the
Mm.
delivery is very, very, very difficult. It is very difficult to get people to engage with your campaigns. And it's getting harder and harder because we have
Mm.
so many challenges. We have so many entry points. So
Yeah.
I don't think your reaction was unjust. I think if you continued in that space, I think you would be shifting into the God complex.
Mm. That's quite profound insights that you've shared around the science and the spiritual side. And I mean, this is just one narrative around how we could kind of leap into that God complex state. And I guess that if I'm reflecting here now, my spiritual side, I trust the process around the science of their system because I've been following them for 4 years and I can
Mm,
see in their social evidence and proof of their work, they know what they're talking about.
mm,
But my spiritual side has been a bit off because I'm trying to look at how do I sort of replace a retainer income that is imminent that's going to fall away. And so the investment I'm making is important to me because, it's either invest in the campaign or keep that money towards other things to build the business. And so you're right, it is a gamble. So the spiritual side is absolutely, which I'm realizing now, is off balance. And so that then can lead into, as you say, some of these behaviors that we can exhibit that might be perceived by the company that's doing this for me is that I'm ignoring feedback, but yet underpinning that is actually something that's there's fear, there's doubts. So I want you to tap into like what have you picked up in trends in the last while with the people that you've been working with? What stories are there even within your own space that you can share with us that you're so excited to tap into?
So yeah, look, I've picked up a couple of things. One of them, just kind of being aware of the signs that you might be operating from the God complex, so that when you do recognize those signs, you are able to adjust accordingly. I don't think any of us go out intentionally to be difficult business owners, but I think our experiences and the environments we operate in kind of rolls us over, and we get smoothed over, and eventually it just kind of just eats away, and then it starts to expose that rawness. So I've picked up, when I talk around, when I say business is science and spiritual, I get a lot of resistance when I hit the spiritual side. And I have to find, like, I have to take a step back and just say, just qualify why I say spiritual, because spiritual encompasses the mind, body, and soul, and encompasses your mindset. Where are you aligned? And it is so important because what I have found lately is, like, when you go into a sales conversation, people are expecting it to be A, B, and C, and D, and the sale comes. But there's all that gray, fuzzy to the power of 5 and to the power of 6 that shows up next to the numbers that it's not really quantifiable, that you have to factor in. But I'm finding a lot of people are reverting to operating in the God complex because it's a protective for them. I think people are very vulnerable at the moment. People are tired. And I'm talking specifically around the small business owner. And I think people are frustrated because they have these great businesses. Some of them have started it not out of choice, but have eventually fallen in love with the business. Some people have, started it out of choice, but the challenges that are coming across their path are just hitting them like one after the other, after the other, after the other, and there's no break or breather. So they just shift into that God complex space because it's a way to kind of protect yourself. It's a way to duck and cover. So that's what I'm finding at the moment is quite prevalent.
Yeah, I mean, the spiritual stuff is always frowned upon, but I feel it's the one thing that could be the catalyst for us to operate from a different vantage point. Because as you said, it's an holistic approach to business, and where we get out of our head, which is ego based, and we actually move into our heart space, where we become more authentic and vulnerable in the way that we show up, and then we can attract business in the way that is more heart centered and conscious and values aligned. I mean, the session I facilitated today was around persuasion. But when we go out there as business owners, often we feel we need to sell our product or sell our service offering. But yet, the important thing is, what are you solving and how am I serving? And that's the spiritual realm, right? When we remove ourselves from the energy of, I need to make the money, I need to make the money. If I'm solving and I'm serving, I almost feel like we will attract what we need to attract, because what we're positioning ourselves out there to be is solving these problems, being part of a solution. So you are right, and when we go in and we're focusing on profit and generating new revenue or new leads or new prospects, it can take us down a rabbit hole, a dark, dark rabbit hole, because we almost forget our true essence of why we're showing up in the first place.
Yeah. Yeah. And, I think for me, I do believe that faith plays a very big role in actually helping you get closer to your customer and helping you to actually, you know, I don't want to say survive in business, but help get you to thrive in business. And a lot of us have, and this is what obviously I love about living in our country, is we have such a diverse faith-based systems out there that, you know, really it's the pick. You know, you get to choose what faith resonates with you, and you get to, you know, get to practice that faith. But sometimes it's kind of like the faith gets left at home, you know, and you go to work. But I think it's really important that we understand that faith plays a very, very big role in in factoring your success into the science formula. Because you have the formula. Remember, to create that formula, that sales formula, the 5 calls, the 10 meetings, whatever your formula is, somewhere along the line, somebody had to have faith in creating that. And someone had to take a leap of faith in developing that concept. I didn't come up with that concept. It's a concept that comes out from Harvard. So while it is scientific and it can be proven and it has formula and it has ingredients, there is that element of faith that comes in that takes it to the next level. You can have the greatest brand in the world. You can have the best website, the greatest logo, and you can be very proud of your company. And you can have a great sales rep. But that faith takes your business to the next level. And it also helps you ride the storms. It helps you navigate the challenges that you face on a daily basis and keeps you away from the God complex.
Tell me, like, I mean, we shared when I posted the event some of these behaviors, and I really want to delve into a bit of that because I think those are very useful for us to touch on. And I'm not sure if you can share a bit more practical examples where you've experienced this yourself, because you're a business owner and you work with a lot of business owners. And then there's suppliers that we need to deal with as well. You know, suppliers that supply us with a particular service or product. I want to mention just top line what they are, and then if you would be willing to then just go into whatever resonates for you to speak to first. So some of these God complex behaviors, for those that are listening, we are talking about the God complex and what are these behaviors that small business owners with a God complex might exhibit. One of them is ignoring feedback, micromanaging, taking all the credit, refusing to admit mistakes, overriding rules and procedures, disregarding employee well-being. Oh gosh, that came up a lot today in my facilitation. Demanding special treatment, inflexibility, alienating clients and partners, and then making unilateral decisions. Maybe what we can do is actually go through all of them, Brad, if you wouldn't mind indulging us. I mean, from an ignoring feedback perspective, how does that almost show up in a practical way?
Yeah, I just actually had a session the other day. You know, when you have these sessions and the person's looking at you and you just know they're not even absorbing the content that you're creating, that you're giving them, you know. So I think ignoring feedback shows up in a way where you can come with a great suggestion and you can, for example, sit in front of an SMME and say, look, we've evaluated your business, we've worked together. I kind of feel like this is the feedback that I need to give you regarding where your improvements areas are. And the person just doesn't act on it, doesn't acknowledge it, believes that what they've been doing for the last 10 or 20 or 30 years is what they can still keep doing. So ignoring feedback is a perfect way not to actually evolve in your business. And we know as small business owners, your businesses we have to evolve on a continuous basis. Otherwise, we're just not going to survive. So ignoring feedback for me shows up when you kind of just approach someone and you give them your opinion and you just get that glassy-eyed, you know, they're kind of just humoring you. If
Mm.
I pick that up in a session, I generally just kind of stop and
Good.
change my approach, and hopefully that will work. And then also maybe, just if you don't mind, just shooting into the next one. So this is a big thing for me. So when I shift into the God complex space, and I often do it, and it's often because it's caused by a trigger, and I move into kind of elements of that space. My big one is micromanaging. So what I will do is get involved in every aspect of the business in a way to understand where the problem is, but also, in a way to control all the processes. So as soon as I feel like I want to be involved in everything, it kind of raises a warning bell for me that I'm shifting into a mindset or a mind space that I should not be in. There are times when micromanagement is not a bad thing if it is done
Yes.
on a project by project basis. But if you're constantly micromanaging, you're ignoring feedback from your team, you're micromanaging, and you're saying things like, this is how it's done. And the person says, I would like to try something different. And you'll say, this is how it's done. I've always done it. This has always worked. This is how we're going to stick. And again, there are times when that is important. When you do know, because you've been in business for a long time, specifically us that have been, we do know what works and doesn't work, more or less. So
Mm.
there are
Mm.
times, but again, if you're having more than, let's say, 3 or 4 points that we're going to list here today, you need to kind of check which space you're operating in.
Just I want to come back to the micromanaging part, Brad.
Hmm.
I agree with your sentiment. When there are risks and you know you need to mitigate these risks, be it on about project basis or just generally within the company with a relationship or just a huge risk. As a business owner, you do need to almost step into that God complex and say, I need to do this because I need to mitigate the risk. It's a different leadership style and energy that needs to
Hmm.
take place. However, um, when we talk about micromanaging, we're also influencing culture, the climate within that organization. We're also influencing psychological safety and trust.
Hmm.
Have you got any practical examples of where that's happened with maybe people that you've coached as an SMME and
Hmm.
they are losing people are, no longer staying in the organization, or that's impacting the customer experience on the outside?
Yeah, I mean, I've got a very practical example. We've got a client we've been working with for some time now, and they have excessive control over every aspect of the business. So nothing will really happen in that business without the CEO's approval. And it creates such hurdles because you want to run with projects. You want to be able to, work in a different department and just make a decision and get going with it. But it gets kind of held
Mm.
up and mothballed because it's not a priority for the CEO at a particular time. So it's a difficult situation. I don't know if micromanaging is a good way to put it, but I think that if you are concerned about the deliverables of your business, I think it's a great opportunity to sit with someone and say, take me through how you work and evaluate them and the results that they produce as an individual, opposed to coming in and saying, I'll do this because I do it better than you. But on the flip side, what I have found is a lot of companies that small businesses work with, a lot of the larger corporates, actually expect you to micromanage. They, in their minds, believe that you play an integral role in every single aspect of your business because you're a business owner.
Mm.
So if you're a small business owner, the expectation I would find from the bigger corporates and maybe just from the general customer is you should be involved in everything, but that's not possible. So there are
Sure.
going to be times when you're not going to be dealing with me, you're going to be dealing with a colleague in my office. And I have found that when I've grown from being a two-man team to being a much bigger team, and I've taken clients on that growth journey with me, there has been resistance.
Mm.
So growing a small business is quite tricky because you have the internal kind of process and issues that you're dealing with, but you also have this external expectation that you've got to consistently micromanage your business, even when your business is a lot bigger than what it was some time ago when you first connected with the client. So that's the flip side of micromanaging. I'm not sure if you agree with that.
Yeah, no, definitely. I have a gentleman that was in my session today. I mean, his business is well established already, and because he was always the person, excuse me, that held that relationships, that closed those deals, the business has grown. He doesn't need to be that person anymore, but he almost finds himself sabotaging himself going into every meeting. And also now the clients have that expectation. So yes, it can be quite a fine line to push you into a space where it's not really serving you or the business.
Yeah, and the thing is you don't want to be cornered into a space where you feel your clients don't want that growth. Obviously, if you're a very small business and let's say you've got four clients that you service with impeccable quality and standards, and now you're bringing in somebody to assist you. So naturally, that person is probably not going to operate at the standard that you operate in.
Sure.
But your client is still expecting that excellence. Now you get the scenario where the client is not actually wanting your growth because, in essence, their service is kind of suffering a little bit. But as a
Mm,
business owner, you've gone above and beyond the mandate. So you believe that you're still delivering, you're just not doing it the Anissa way or the Brad way.
mm, mm,
And, me having partners being brought into the business, I've picked that up quite strongly that clients that you service, and this talks to over servicing clients, a whole different discussion, just really don't want to support that growth because at the end of the day, they feel like they're the ones that are taking the brunt of the growth.
mm,
So micromanaging can be something you put on yourself. You're operating from the God complex space. It's one of the signs. You could be doing it because you want the control, because you believe you can do better than everyone. And it could also be something that is expected from the client side. So it can
mm,
play both
mm.
ways. It's quite a tricky one, an
So
intense, tricky one.
this is a nice segue into the next one because they're taking all the credit. I'm want to be in control of everything. I'm going to micromanage everything so that if it goes well, I'll take all the credit because it was my idea. I did everything. But I don't know if that's really the context of the taking all the credit for the God complex. Maybe delve into that.
Yeah, I think they don't. I think when it comes to taking all the credit, it can also be done very subtly. It can
Mm-hmm.
be done in a way where, for example, a very small way, you would be having a conversation, let's say online, and the person always wants to have the last little say. They want the tail end of their conversation. That could also be part of taking all the credit because you want to be seen as the final person to put a stamp on approval on that conversation. It can also be somebody who refuses to communicate and share with what they are doing because they feel like it's not necessary. So while everybody in your company is kind of communicating with each other and keeping everyone up to date, this person or you yourself as a business owner feel like it's not necessary for you to do that. So taking all the credit is kind of gray area because it's not something as simple as saying, I'm better than you, I did this myself, I am the king of the castle. It can be also very subtly done. It's also very frustrating for me when I'm sitting with SMMEs and the owner of the company is actually sitting in the meeting. They have delegated someone else to receive the coaching and mentoring, but they're constantly giving their 2 cents. And
Ooh.
it is so frustrating because you are giving your insights as a professional, because I mean,
Mm,
this is not something we think up. We don't just become coaches overnight. It's a process we've gone through. And this person comes in and kind of either validates or dismisses what you're saying to that recipient
mm.
because they believe, you know, they know it all. So yeah, it's a very tricky one. It's something I pick up quite a bit, but I pick it up very subtly, very, very subtly.
Yeah, I think you've hit the nail on the head. I think even within teams, I find that God complex comes about is that it's, they may exhibit behaviors of almost criticizing your attempts and endeavors
Hmm.
on bringing solutions to the table. And in some cases, those solutions might have even worked, but they'll
Hmm.
find anything possible to derail those endeavors so that their way or what they're bringing across is actually more validated. So it almost undermines everything that you've done.
Yeah, yeah.
And it's got more to do with them than it has to do with you. And sometimes I sit in observing some of these behaviors and I have to take a step back, Brad, because I'm like, okay, I see this happening. Okay. Then I
Hmm.
try and lead with empathy because I'm like, what's going on for this person?
Hmm.
Must they be so spiritually empty? And I'm using the word spiritual again, simply because if you're spiritually full, you won't need to take the credit. You won't need to micromanage. You won't need to be arrogant and ignore feedback. I mean, those are the first three behaviors that we just spoke to.
Hmm. Yeah, um, you see examples of it all around. But again, I want to go back. When you're an SMME, I feel like you touch on all of these points. I feel like some point in your career as an SMME, if I can call it a career, right,
Mm,
you would shift in and out of the God complex, and it's purely for survival, and it's purely because the reality of running a business is way beyond what people expect. It's the truth behind it. And this is why I love these sessions and I love doing public speaking, because I always talk about, generally when you start coaching or you join, these seed academies, they always hit the surface stuff. They always tell you, you need to do this, you need to show up, and da, 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 da. But there's those layers underneath, that deepness, that when you start to dwell down into your core being. For
mm,
example, I'm a person that has to produce great work. It's very important for
yeah.
me. But that's my value system. And it's a value system that I've imprinted on the business because I have created the business. Business is my child.
Mm,
So,
mm,
but I know that there's people within my company or the company that don't share that principle.
mm,
That's in itself a trigger for me to move into the God complex, because I would then come in and micromanage a specific project because I know that project is not being produced at the level that it should be. So,
sure.
yeah, it's quite intense and taking all the credit.
Yeah,
Look, this is
profound,
something
profound
I
for
think,
me.
yeah, I mean, it's the thing. It's my thing is that you have to really work on who you are. What is your success story as an individual? Because it directly affects your business. Because you get to a point, and I saw it with another colleague of mine, you get to a point where you get so frustrated, and I've experienced this over the last 2 weeks, that you just want to push back and give up.
Mm,
And
mm,
when you reach that point as a business owner, it's not about just quitting your job and going home and start applying for other work. It's about literally watching a child that you have created just die
yeah.
because you have put everything into that business. So when you're at a point of giving up, I'm not talking about a failed business, I'm talking about a business owner giving up.
Mm,
You're at such a raw, hollow point. that you would naturally shift into the space because it is your ego protecting you,
Yes.
because
Yes.
you are so vulnerable. And if you don't have people in your space that understand that and can sympathize and pick up those signs, you then not only have to be at the point of giving up, but you kind of have to explain to everybody how you're feeling. It's like when you lose, when you marry to someone and you lose them, God forbid, and people invite you to an event and then they patronize you. Oh, I'm so sorry for your loss. And that's like the last thing that you
Mm,
want to hear.
exactly.
So I think there's this essence in business ownership that I don't think we recognize how amazing we are as business owners for just
Mm-hmm.
showing up.
Mm. Brad, I kicked up with another group cohort of small medium enterprise entrepreneurs in the food security system, right? And we spoke about also understanding what you're saying, the God complex is fluctuating within all of us. So we're never going to be we fallible human beings. We are going to be triggered. But the trigger, I always say, is our treasure. And so we can then check in with ourselves. Why are we triggered in that moment? And
Mm,
the profound thing that you shared is the value system, because your
mm,
success story and your value system are almost interconnected.
mm,
They're part of the same thing. Because if we're not in our value systems, we're not in our truth. And if we're not
mm,
in our truth, it means we are almost compromising ourselves and we don't have boundaries in place.
mm,
And so the God complex, the protection mechanism that you are alluding to, is absolutely normal then, because it's only normal that because you put your blood, sweat, tears into that baby, into that business, you're going to do whatever it takes to protect it. And it might be coming across out of context and in the wrong way, but the intentionality behind it is really to actually to make sure that this thing is protected. Now, protection or trying to be defensive or protective is also underpinned by fear, unfortunately, and that's our
mm,
harsh
mm,
reality.
mm,
So that's why I say the triggers are our treasures, because we've got to go and sit with ourselves as business owners in the same way that I arrogantly appeared, and I call it arrogant and I will own it, Brad. I was a bit
mm,
arrogant this week. But what was sitting beneath that arrogance was one of the founders of this business that was not being forthcoming to respond to my concerns of what I
mm,
voiced at the start of running this campaign. The request for, come now, let's talk about this. Let's have a refinement session, a pause to evaluate so that we can refine. So I never went into it in that way just for the sake of it, but it
mm,
got to that because I started to feel like, hey, I need to protect my investment here.
mm, mm.
And so I went into that God complex simply because you are threatening now my livelihood and you're not showing respect, which is a value to me, to acknowledge it even. So
Mm.
there is this fine line, and we do need to be whole within ourselves. And if something isn't values aligned, trust me that God complex will rear its ugly head, unfortunately.
Yeah, look, I agree. And I mean, we can go through the other points, but I think we'll run out of time. But I mean,
No, we haven't. We've still got
we
time. We definitely have time. So let's go
yeah.
into the rest of them.
Yeah, so I mean, we have the micromanaging. Other signs is refusing to admit mistakes. We've also got disregarding employee well-being. I think that's a nice one to look at. Demanding special
Yeah.
treatment, alienating clients and partners, and of course, we have making unilateral decisions. Now, again, Anissa, I could probably tick all of these boxes of being within one of these at any sort of given time over the last 2 years.
Mm-hmm.
So, in essence, we're calling it the God complex. We do understand, as a disclaimer for this session, that there are different degrees within the God complex. There are different motivators. Sometimes it's a clinical condition.
Mhm.
Sometimes it is something that you can shift in and out of. But I I think we need to understand that when we in these spaces, we're not doing the best we can for our business. And I think we
Mhm.
need to understand that, yes, the people that work with us as business owners, the people we bring in to help grow our businesses, may not share the same values, may not share the same work ethic even. And you can go through any business, job interview. You can be as thorough as you can be, but you really never know who you're bringing in. So you
Mhm.
have to be very strong and steadfast in what is negotiable and non-negotiable. But then you also have to be able to let go. It's literally like having a child. And as your child
Mhm.
gets older and older, and you have to go through this let go process and have to trust that they are going to be home at a certain time, and that when they are out in the big wide world, that they are going to deliver on the standards that you expect from them. And all of this, I think, does contribute to making us overwhelmed, tired,
Mhm.
exhausted. We have to spring from finance to operations to home life to this to that to self health all of the time. And then on top of that, we've got to consider the well being of our employees. And, when I started working, my first job, I wouldn't even dream of taking a sick day. I would have known if I took that sick day, I would have not had a job when I come back because there were 10 other people that wanted to work in that publishing house. So
Mhm.
things have changed and have evolved, and we need to accept that and work around that. So not only do you need to look after your own well-being and avoid triggers that shift you into that God complex space, but you have to do the
Mhm.
same for your employees around you. And man, oh man, that is a tough job.
It is
Tough.
hard. It is extremely
Dude, you
hard.
got, it's tricky. It really is tricky, and then you've got external factors. You've got the news that you've got to contend with, which I believe really our news is not geared for encouragement on any level.
Oh.
And then for downtime, you jump onto Instagram because you kind of want to see what's out there and you enjoy the scrolling, because you just want to switch off. And again, you're just getting kind of bombarded with all this expectation as a business
Mhm.
owner. And you're like, oh, guys, where do we go to completely switch off?
Mm.
And that could open a whole new discussion that we could have perhaps in our next session about how do we switch off as business owners, because a lot of us struggle with that.
Yeah, I mean, before we came live, we were talking about having a pause, and
Mhm.
we can't be working in and on the business simultaneously, and to be strategic in our business and be cognizant and have awareness of these God conscious, God complex behaviors. You're not going to have the awareness if you're tired, if you're completely knackered because you're running the show, you're taking control of everything. And as you rightly say, if you're not a lot of people in your business, you're almost having to be jack of all trades. You're going to have to touch on so many areas. And you do, it's not because you don't trust the team that's there, but ultimately you're still the accountable person to make this work.
Mm. Yeah,
And
look, the buck stops with you. You're the one that has signed the
but
debit
stop
orders.
it.
You're the one that you're the one that has signed the loan. You're the one that carries the liability. And up and above that, you do want to create something of substance so that you can leave a
Mm,
legacy. You don't want to
mm,
work, you know, 15 hours a day for the next 20,
nope.
30 years just to turn over what you're turning over today. And all business owners, whoever I speak to, and you must understand, you know me well, I don't operate from a negative mindset.
Mm,
But
mm,
a lot of business owners saying it's just getting harder and harder to make ends meet. So
yeah.
we don't have a lot of control over the things that affect us. That makes it a little bit more difficult. So, we're not the big fish. We're not the big blue chip companies and the big corporates that have the insights and the connections with government to influence policy. In fact, I think our small business, if I understand correctly, our small business minister has never even run a business. We have our Minister of Justice who invested in a coffee shop that's no longer around. So, we have to, as business owners, step up and perform in an environment where we actually have very little control over. If they tomorrow announce that we go back into load shedding, we have to adapt. So
Yeah.
we are up against so much, but this is why it is very important to have the things that you do have control of sorted, in place, finalized, and you
Yeah.
stick to that like glue because that is your sanctuary. That is the thing that's going to keep you going. So if you have a success story that you have written about what your expectations of the business is and it aligns to what your business can deliver, that in itself will encourage you because no matter what challenge you get, your expectations always aligned. So you're not going to get to the end of the month and expect a lot and receive a little.
Let's talk leadership. Let's not digress from the theme, but how does leadership and self-leadership play a role within the context of this God complex? I mean, where have you seen really great leaders? Because we exhibit these behaviors throughout our time, and I'm talking with the small businesses. They're great leaders, but somewhere along the line, that leadership, that strong visionary leadership falls by the wayside. And why do you think that happens?
I think your trust in people is eroded because the quality and the standards of people's ability to deliver is just completely non-existent. And we see it on a daily basis. I mean, the quality of service. Are we fortunate, in my opinion, that we live in a country where people still greet and are friendly and really take an interest? But, you don't have to travel very far to see that the quality of service from the average man out there, the average Joe in the streets, it's just so poor, So you could work really hard in leading people correctly and doing everything by the book. But, people aren't receptive to good leadership. And, good leadership is about boundaries. Good leadership is about holding people accountable. Good leadership is about making tough choices. But if you look at what is out there in the public space, people don't want that kind of leadership, but they still want the delivery. They still want the benefits of it. But nobody wants to be held accountable.
Mm.
So I think it just gets eroded over time. I think people get hurtful and get tired of it. But there's ways you can mitigate that. You can create a great company culture. You are a salesman if you're a small business owner. So put your salesperson hat on and see your employees as an extension of your customer and, sell them the dream. And unfortunately, you might have to do
Yeah.
that consistently depending on the type of people you have in your space. So these things are all mitigatable, if that is a word. But
Yeah, but when the going gets tough, Brad, the tough gets going, right? So when it's really tough times and the SMME is not making business and they've lost clients, they're not signing any new deals, employee well-being, I think, takes a dip because the person is so in survival mode. How do you lead effectively when you're in survival? Comes back to the
exactly.
spiritual part again.
It does. Exactly. I mean, it's this concept of like, how do you uplift others when you can't even get out of bed? And it's a reality
Exactly.
for a lot of business owners that is the reality that they are facing. If they didn't have to take kids to school, if they didn't have to unlock the shop, or they didn't have to, they wouldn't get out of bed. And I know that the session has come across as so negative, and that's like the last thing we want to do. But I think these are such important discussions to have because we have to know that this exists. We have to know our environment that we operate and be real about the environment. But there are ways that you can, without even being present, encourage your employees to step up, because there are those out there that want to be part of that success story, that want to see the
Mm,
business grow. And there are many examples of companies starting in garages and in living rooms and in kitchens and everything, and growing into these huge corporate businesses. And the employees have been taken on that journey.
mm.
I just think that at the moment we're kind of in a lull. And I think as a collective, we need to kind of just uplift that a bit, and it does help.
Yes.
One of the
Yeah.
things that one of the things that keeps me motivated about business ownership is actually, for example, what I'm doing with you today. Because I walk away from this session knowing I'm not the only one out there having these issues.
Yeah.
I don't feel so alone. And loneliness is a huge factor in business ownership. You can have 6 partners, but if you're not being supported in the way you need to be, it can be very lonely.
Mm. That's spot on. I was listening to a podcast, and this woman was also saying, and again, I echo, this is not about bringing negativity to this conversation, but it's bringing the rawness of what we are all actually going through. And I like
Mm,
to use the word growing through, because we have to grow through these difficult times and also be taking accountability when we are showing up ourselves negatively, and how we should be doing better going forward, but by not shaming ourselves, because we are human after all, right?
mm,
So this lady says that your feet will never take you where your mind has never been before.
mm. That's wrong.
Quite a powerful statement. And she also says skills will take you so far, but it's actually your will.
Mm,
It's that grit, your will, your resilience factor, your
mm,
stickability factor that's going to make you continue the journey no matter what is showing up on your path.
mm.
It's like you said, we don't want to get up. We just feel like, damn, can I just throw in the towel already? But we can't, because we still need to put bread on the table.
Mm,
We still need to have a roof over our head. We still have to pay for the vehicle or the assets in the business. And
mm,
so I feel, from a God complex perspective, it can be in service to us as well. In the same way, like ego is in service to us, it just reminds us where we might need to be taking the pause, where we might need to be getting still,
yeah.
where we might need to be almost investing time to understand what's not working, so that we can refine it, so that we can come from a different rejuvenated place,
Mm,
so that our mindset can be
yeah.
shifted in the way that she says. If we shift the mindset of the lull, because everything in the news is negative.
Mm,
The only thing I'm following is the good guy, South African guy. What's his name? Brett. I love the fact
mm,
that he's still sharing these good stories.
mm,
We need more of those stories to latch onto, because right now, you talk about 80-20, 20% we hear is positive and 80% is negative. And whether
mm.
you're going into Instagram to scroll, to try and de-stress and kind of detach from, there's still stuff even in Instagram that's negative.
Yeah,
So
there's
I
triggers.
find that,
I mean,
yes,
there's
there's triggers,
triggers
there's trigger points.
because you're getting told on Instagram what you need to be doing, and I've got this amount of this and I'm that, and I find, I don't know, this is a bit of a side thing, but I'm finding that people are having really weird pets at the moment. I'm like, what is with that? It's like a competition to find the weirdest animal out there and make it a pet. And I'm like, what happened to just having like a dog or a cat or a bird or a fish? So, that's quite of humorous, I must say. But I, I, I think that the thing is we don't need more good stories. We need to be the good story.
Oh, I
We
love
need
that.
to we need to really focus, and that has been my big spiritual shift,
Mm,
has been to focus on my good story. And it has been so difficult because we have triggers, as much as
mm,
I love my success story and I'm living my success story. My personality, I'm still comparing and I'm still thinking, and I mean, you've experienced the conversations we've had. And I think it's really important to just be the success. Just
Mm.
don't kind of rely on external influences to guide your level of success, because no matter what you're doing, I mean, I've
Mm.
had conversations with the one lady that in Midrand that sells fish and chips at the rank, and she's just living her
Yes.
success. I've never met such a happy person, honestly. I'm like, dude, I don't know where your happiness comes from. It's either the fish that you're eating or something. Because I don't know what's happening, but and it just really gets you to think that there's a lot of us living our success with actually very little, and it then talks to the
Yes.
whole conversation about what is wealth and what is expectation around wealth and how warped that really is. I mean,
Mm.
how weird is the world we're living in, where our politicians come onto radio, TV interviews wearing clothing that 99% of the population cannot afford.
Mm.
How does that work? How how does that feed into that collective understanding of success?
Mm.
And
Mm.
it just gets commented and questioned, but nothing obviously that happens with it. So yeah, we're up
Yeah.
against a lot, and I think the God complex can be a security blanket, but it can be a very bad place to shift into. And I think once you're in
Yes.
it, it's very difficult to get out of it. So avoid it where you can.
I'm very grateful for these conversations and for you bringing so much different new perspective and insights to this conversation. It's not something that I even thought about. I heard the God complex through you. And yes, I've exhibited those behaviors unknowingly, unconsciously, but it now has a frame of reference.
Mm.
So I concur with you that we need to be the good stories. We need to put
Mm.
into practice. We need to shift from the thief of comparison and destination happiness, because ultimately it's not about when I get to 10 million rand turnover in my business, I will be happy and feel like I've arrived. No, it's the mini milestones. It's the pursuit of the journey that we need to be celebrating as well. And I sat last night and I was celebrating. I was like, wow, look at all the things that have been accomplished in this year and even in this month, and even with imminent changes in income security for me. I didn't
Mm.
go and focus on the lack of potential income. I was like, wow, look
Mm.
how much is happening. Look at these good that is actually unfolding. But you have to fill your spiritual vessel
Yeah.
in order to stay in that energy, in order to know and intercept when you're moving into that God consciousness. So in the last 2 minutes, I will see we've got Aisha Abbas and Hayat from Algeria, all the way from Algeria. Thank you for being there on Instagram with me. I'm not sure where Aisha Abbas is from. Please let us know where you're from. And I see we have a comment, but in this time, oh, so Kelsey says, so true. You can find happiness in the little things. Yes. Find happiness in the small successes, in the small wins, and we can forget it in the way that I did this week myself, right? When I said I forgot what the win was. The win was I was showing up, I was consistent, I was trying new things, I was willing to learn. So, Brad, in the last few minutes or minute that we have left, what is it that you'd like to leave our audience with, or those that listen to the replay, in how to shift this level of consciousness in context to God complex?
I think the focus should be on the balance between your spiritual approach to business and your scientific approach to business. So there are ways, there's non-negotiables. Business has to run, things have to happen, processes need to be followed. But it's definitely
Mm-hmm.
that spiritual element, whatever you practice that brings you closer to happiness becomes your absolute crutch in
Mm.
ensuring that you can spend a lot of time in this beautiful world we called SMME.
Yeah. From my side, I'd like to say it's being meaningfully connected to yourself and having that relationship with yourself that is holistic, that is healthy, that is optimal, and embracing all parts of yourself, even when you do shift into God complex, and knowing that it's impermanent, that at any given time, you have choice to shift that. So, on that
Yeah.
note, I want to say thank you for those that have joined us. Please don't hesitate to reach out if we can support you in any way. Brad and I are always open to collaborate, to partner, to just listen, to hold that space for you. And until next month, Brad, I look forward to our next conversation. I will
Yeah.
end the live now. Thank you, Kelsey, for always being with us as well and for sharing your little wisdoms that come through too. And on that note, goodbye for us from now. And Brad, we normally stay on for a brief
Yeah.
debrief.
No problem.